The world will try to shrink you, not all at once, but slowly, subtly, consistently. It will chip away at the edges of your confidence, whittle down the parts of you that don't conform, and convince you that smaller is safer. It starts when you're young, you're loud, you're curious, you're wild, untamed, full of light and hunger and questions, and the world begins its work. Sit down, quiet down, fit in, be less, not better, not wiser, not stronger, just less. And if you listen long enough, you start to believe it. You start to trade boldness for approval, trade dreams for duties, and that deep, dangerous fire you had, you learn to keep it small enough to manage, small enough to explain, small enough to not scare anyone, until one day you don't even recognize the man in the mirror, not because you became someone else, but because you let the world convince you that your fullness was too much to carry. But here's the truth. Your life will always mirror the size of your spirit. Shrink your presence, and everything you build will shrink with it. Shrink your courage, and your opportunities will stay just out of reach. Shrink your truth, and you'll find yourself surrounded by people who don't really see you. The world wants you tame, predictable, contained, because a man who won't be shrunk is dangerous. A man who won't play small is powerful. A man who refuses to shrink, not out of ego, but out of sacred responsibility, cannot be controlled. And that is exactly the kind of man the world needs. Because it's not just about you. When you shrink, you give other people permission to do the same. When you downplay your strength, other men do too. When you doubt your voice, others will silence theirs. But when you rise, when you expand, when you walk boldly in your full form, you remind every man around you that they can do the same. You become a mirror, a signal, a standard. So the real question is this: who suffers when you shrink, and who rises when you don't? This is not about arrogance or being the loudest man in the room. It's about not hiding your strength to keep weak people comfortable. It's about honoring the truth of who you are, even when it costs you. It's about standing tall when the world tells you to sit down. Because here's what the world won't tell you. Your gifts were never meant to be managed. Your calling was never meant to be convenient. Your fire was never meant to be quiet. You weren't built for a life that fits inside someone else's comfort zone. You were built to lead, to build, to bear weight. You were built to rise again and again, no matter how many times life tries to pull you down. But rising isn't just something you do once. It's a discipline, a practice, a way of being. You rise by how you show up when no one's watching. You rise by what you refuse to tolerate in yourself. You rise by how you speak when your voice shakes. You rise by what you build when it would be easier to blame. And over time, rising becomes who you are. Not something you chase, not something you earn, but a part of your posture in the world, a quiet power, a noble defiance, a way of saying, I will not be shrunk. I will not be silenced. I will not be shaped by fear. Because when you rise, when you truly rise, you don't need to announce it. The room shifts when you enter. The air changes when you speak. The people around you either stand taller or leave. But you remain still, grounded, unapologetically full. That's the work. To hold your ground when the world says, be less. To choose expansion over acceptance. To carry the weight of your calling without apology. This is not the easier path, but it is the truer one. And every man must choose, shrink to survive, or rise to lead. That choice will define everything. The world doesn't shrink you through force. It does it through fatigue, wearing you down little by little. It's in the moments you over-explain yourself, the times you make yourself smaller so someone else feels bigger, when you bite your tongue instead of speaking truth. Not because it's wise, but because you're afraid. These moments add up. And over time, you begin to believe that your voice doesn't matter, that your strength is dangerous, that the safest thing you can do is stay quiet. So you shrink, not all at once, not with fanfare, but slowly, invisibly. You stop asking for more. You stop demanding your best. You settle, you tolerate, you endure, and it starts to feel normal. That's the danger. You forget you were ever meant to rise. You forget that your life was built to stretch you, That resistance is part of the design. But the men who rise are not those who avoid the pressure. They're the ones who learn to expand underneath it. Because pressure is not the enemy, comfort is. Comfort says, stay here. Comfort says, you've done enough. Comfort says, don't risk rejection. Don't speak out. Don't stand alone. But a man who chooses comfort over courage will never know what he's capable of. Because everything worth having exists just beyond what's comfortable. Growth is uncomfortable. Leadership is uncomfortable. Love, the kind that requires presence and power and patience, is uncomfortable. And so rising means discomfort. It means letting go of who you were to become who you're called to be. It means burning old identities to build something unshrinkable in their place. It means being seen fully, clearly, without filters. And that's terrifying, because once you stop shrinking, you lose the luxury of hiding. You stop being everyone's version of who you're supposed to be, and you become you, unfiltered, uncompromising, unafraid, not because fear disappears, but because it stops deciding who you are. And that kind of man, that kind of presence, it shakes things, not because he's loud, but because he's undeniable. He doesn't demand attention. He commands it with his calm, with his conviction, with his refusal to flinch. And men like that, they cannot be controlled. They cannot be manipulated with praise or punishment, because their identity isn't built on applause. It's built in the dark, in the silence of their own discipline, in the quiet mornings where they do the work, not for recognition, but because it's right, in the private moments when no one is watching and they still choose excellence. That's where real power is forged, away from the noise, beyond the reach of the world's opinions, because at some point, every man must decide, will I build myself around who they expect me to be, or will I build myself into who I was born to become? And the answer will cost you. It will cost comfort, relationships, validation. It might even cost you the version of success you thought you wanted. But what you gain is peace, not the peace of passivity, but the peace that comes from knowing I am full. I am clear. I am unshrinkable. I know who I am. I know what I carry, and I will not apologize for it. That's the man the world needs. Not a copy, not a pleaser, not a man who contorts himself to fit the crowd, but a man who knows the weight of his words, who walks in truth even when it costs him, who builds quietly, consistently, regardless of who's watching. And most of all, a man who cannot be shrunk, because when you rise like that, you create space for others to rise too. You show your sons what strength looks like. You show your brothers what's possible. You show the world that some men will not fold, will not flinch, will not fit in. They will rise again and again, not out of rebellion, but out of reverence for who they're becoming. And that is the legacy, not what you achieve, not what you acquire, but who you become while the world tries to make you smaller, and the quiet, grounded courage it takes to rise anyway. There will be days when it feels easier to disappear. Days when the weight is heavy, the vision is blurry, and the voice in your head whispers, why bother? That's when you'll be most tempted to shrink again, to play it safe, to do what's expected, to blend in and survive the day. But you weren't built for survival, you were built for expansion. And expansion requires resistance. The oak does not become mighty without the storm. The warrior does not become sharp without the struggle. The man does not rise unless he first chooses to. And so when the day feels dark, remember, this is part of the becoming. This is how the world tests your sincerity. You say you want to lead, you say you want to grow. Good. Let's see who you are when it's inconvenient. Let's see what you choose when no one applauds. Let's see if you'll rise, even when no one is watching. That's the forge. That's the fire. And it doesn't just refine you, it reveals you, because you don't rise once. You rise daily, in decisions no one sees, in disciplines no one praises, in standards no one else holds. You rise in how you speak to yourself when you fail. You rise in how you carry yourself when the outcome doesn't match the effort. You rise in the moments that look ordinary, but define everything. And little by little, Those moments form a man who cannot be shrunk. Because he's not performing, he's becoming. He's not chasing, he's anchoring. He's not reacting to the world, he's rising within it. And that kind of man, calm, clear, grounded in truth, he doesn't have to shout. He simply lives in a way that cannot be ignored. So if the world tells you to shrink, smile. That means you're growing. It means your presence is confronting something. It means your truth is making people uncomfortable. And that's not your problem to solve. Your job is not to soothe the insecurities of the crowd. Your job is to stay the course, to live a life of such integrity, discipline, and fullness that shrinking is no longer even an option. Not because you're trying to prove something, but because you finally remembered who you are, because you finally stopped negotiating with smallness, because you finally stood still long enough to feel the weight of your own presence and decided it was holy. And once you feel that, you never go back. So keep rising, even when they question you, even when they doubt you, even when they leave you, especially then, because your rising isn't just for you. It's for every man still trapped in a life too small, every man waiting for permission, every man who's forgotten what he carries. You don't rise to impress. You rise to remind that the world may try to shrink you, but you rise anyway.